Hey up and welcome to the Strategy Sessions. My name's Andy Jarvis and I'm so pleased that you've come along today. I'm joined today by Gregg from Lightyear. Chris, how are you doing?
Andy, I am great. Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Brilliant stuff. Lightyear, if you don't know them, a company based in Belfast. Chris, tell us what Lightyear does. You'll be able to explain it much better than I can.
Yeah, cool. Thanks, Andy. So Lightyear, we're an accounts payable automation solution. And what that means is we have a cloud platform that helps large SMEs and mid-market businesses automate their accounts payable process. For those of your listeners who don't know what an accounts payable process is, right? That's basically a business's process of taking all of the supplier invoices that they need to pay, having those invoices approved for payment, getting the data entered, and then ultimately making the payment to those suppliers. So it's not exactly the sexiest thing that you'll come across, but every business has to pay bills, right? So it's a critical piece of the puzzle for any business. We've been going for about 2.5 years, so we're still pretty young, moving from startup to scale up. Offices, our head office is here in Belfast, as you've mentioned. We've got 15 people here. And then we have a APAC head office in Sydney, Australia. All those guys get the lovely sunshine while I get the short days and the cold nights. And we've got 10 people down in Sydney, Australia. And focus historically has been on sort of the ANZ markets and the UK and Ireland. But as a business, we're starting to get into our stride. And we're looking at how we start to expand globally. So it's a pretty exciting time for us here at Lightyear.
Brilliant. Now, one of the reasons I wanted to get you on, because Lightyear has a really interesting backstory. But you mentioned it's 2.5 years old, but there's a little bit before that 2.5 years as well, isn't it? So do you want to take us back to the beginning?
Yeah, sure. And I'm sure you'll be amazed because I look much younger than I actually am. But
much younger.
Much younger. Thank you. You're too kind. I'll take you back to 2008. I moved to Sydney, Australia, and my brother was already over there. And we were working in the hospitality industry for a large hospitality group. We had 15 bars and restaurants across Sydney. And we had a massive pain point, a costly pain point, which was how we were managing our payables process. It was costing us around $15 per invoice to get that data entered, approved, and paid. We had a van that drove around every day around the venues and picked up paper and brought it to head office, and data was typed. And then the van came back from head office drove to a warehouse with big warehouses of filing cabinets. It was crazy.
Sounds painful.
Unbelievable, yes. Incredibly, costly, time consuming, and just inefficient. It was hampering the business's growth, right? We couldn't grow and scale the business at the pace we would like to. So we looked around the market for something that could solve this problem. And at that time, 2010, there was nothing. There was big enterprise solutions. There was sort of emerging software as a service, small business solutions, but nothing for a mid-market, multi-location type of business. And just around that time, Xero with an X were emerging. Xero is now one of the largest small business accounting providers in the world, as I'm sure you know. They were just emerging, early stage. Software as a service wasn't really a thing. The internet was a bit like dial-up modem. Is it safe? Is it not? So we were pretty early stage, but Xero fostered this fantastic ecosystem where they encouraged local entrepreneurs to basically build add-on solutions to their core platform, which would help businesses solve more problems. So we thought it would be a great idea to leave our jobs, mortgage the houses, etc. And we hired a couple of developers. We had no development experience whatsoever. And we decided to start a tech business, right? So fast forward 3 years, we made a lot of mistakes. We could write a book about how not to do a startup, to be honest. We ended up pretty broke and all that sort of stuff. But we got an angel investor on who really helped us out. And in 2013, we won a few awards, such as Xero's Emerging Add-on of the Year. And ultimately, that put us on the radar of Intuit, who are the world's largest small business provider through QuickBooks Online. And ultimately, we sold that business to Intuit in 2014. So that was the original journey. And that product we built was you could say it was V1 of Lightyear, right? It was solving the same kind of pain points, but obviously much more basic, built on old legacy technology. So fast forward to sort of 2.5, 3 years ago when we decided to go and do Lightyear, we were able to take all of the learnings and sort of really hit the ground running. And luckily for us, the market hadn't moved on too much, to be honest. So accounts payable seems to be one of the last untouched segments of business pain points. There's been a lot of innovation around payments, reporting, accounting software, but the actual accounts payable process, to be honest, most of the market are still on backward desktop or even using Excel solutions. So luckily for us, we seem to be timing it pretty well at the moment. The market is much more receptive to cloud solutions at this point, and we're seeing, particularly through COVID in 2020, with the move to remote working, we're really moving out of that early adopter phase into the majority of adoption. So hopefully timing it pretty well.
And do you think the reason why the market hasn't moved on is that there seems to be, in the product world, in the tech world at the minute, a drive to enterprise for every solution? And I think, without ever looking at the numbers hugely, as soon as you start talking about enterprise solutions and enterprise scale, you start to realize that without changing your cost base too much, you can change your revenues quite significantly. And I say I've not looked into it too deeply. So it seems to be that sort of mid-market products, as soon as they start to get any traction, just goes, oh, enterprise, and scales up. Is that why you think you've had that gap left in the market?
Yeah, absolutely, Andy. I think the middle ground is a hard one, right? Because you can build a small, simple solution, relatively straightforward, that can solve simple pain points. And then you can scale that out because you've got a massive market and the messaging's pretty simple. Enterprise is, on the other hand, great because obviously you get a lot of average revenue per user. You have a longer sales cycle, gestation period, but you can land a couple of big whales and it's company maker, right? And then the in-between is the difficult area because you still have to build nearly as much functionality as an enterprise product, right? Because all of these larger and mid-market, larger SMEs, they all have really complex pain points. So you've got to invest a lot of money as a software provider to build that complexity, but you don't necessarily get anywhere near the same amount of revenue as an enterprise solution. So I think that's the main reason that it largely gets neglected. And you see that across the board. You always see enterprise and small come first, and then the mid-market is kind of what's left over. But for us, that mid-market opportunity is still enormous. And we see a lot of mid-market customers that are just neglected. And we've, for us, we've got not that much competition. So we really feel, for us, offering really sort of, we say enterprise standard technology at SME price point is what we try to do. And as a business, that might give us that absolutely aggressive scale at an SME from an end business perspective. It might give us that, top line big revenue per user, but we can build a really solid, sustainable business that can still grow very quickly in the global scheme.
Right. We had April Dunford on the show last year, who, I don't know if you know, April wrote a book about positioning called Obviously Awesome. Is a kind of world expert on positioning, especially with companies like yours. And she makes a really good point. She makes a load of really good points, actually. But the one she makes about when you're positioning, you position against, you look at your competitors and you go, oh, we're positioned against these guys and these guys and these guys. And actually, your competitor is Excel and the intern. And actually, that's a really different sell for you from a marketing perspective. How do you communicate that message? Is that something you mentioned when you were in Sydney and you started building this at first? It was manual input. Is that something you still come across now? How do you position your marketing to kind of get away from that problem?
Yeah, so again, the problem and the solution and the benefit is really how we try and position our product. So a lot of our clients, as you mentioned, they're still on Excel. So we position ourselves around, what is Excel not providing? Okay, so for us, there's some basic things. What are the gaps? So Excel doesn't have a central distributed ledger. Okay, now that's obviously changing a bit with Office 365 and stuff like that. But having one central up-to-date ledger, it doesn't really have privileges and tracking, so you can't sort of track the different interaction points. And for a product like us, that's a financial product that gets audited, having that audit history and traceability and accountability is super important, right? Because we have businesses that are paying suppliers. So for us, it's about what areas of benefit do we provide over those, old historic solutions they're using, and we try and hone in on those. And again, for us, it's about the centralized ledger, the collaboration, the live data, and more importantly, then what you can do with that data. I mean, Excel is a fantastic tool. We love it. We actually use it internally for some things, and
not for managing your invoices, though.
No, not for processing.
No.
Definitely not. But it has a lot of uses, right? And you can get lots of data, but it's not necessarily easy to get your fingers on that data, analyze it easily. You need to layer on business intelligence tools. So those are some of the areas that we look to really accentuate our point of difference and sell the benefits.
Does that take you, though, into talking about product and features quite a lot? I know you said you're selling the benefits, but if you're trying to compare yourself to another solution, does that tend to lead you towards feature versus feature sort of marketing approach? And if that does that open up the door for your competitors, for people to then just start watching features between your product and product B and product C?
Yeah, it's something we grapple with a lot as a marketing team here. There's 3 in my team. We're still pretty small, but the benefit-led messaging to an SME or a mid-market business, it's quite generic. Save time, save money, whatever. You could stick that on any product. So by default, in order to get a point of differentiation across, we do end up going down that feature route. But again, one of our mistakes we made in the earlier days in Lightyear was we were too feature-led. We weren't selling the benefits. So I think for us, we're still learning every day and trying to get it right. We try to get a balance. But you're dead right. I mean, no matter what way we lead in from the marketing, the conversations always come back to what do you do that these guys don't do, right? Or what can you give me feature-wise? So we end up nearly always having a feature-led conversation for sure.
Yeah, at some point. So look, I mean, this kind of strikes to the heart of things that I love talking about. So I talk about FAB with people: features, advantages, and benefits, and how you kind of structure them. The easy way I've come across recently, something I've been working on for a while, I should say, is that 3 words, which means that. So just list your features, which means that usually gives you an advantage, which means that you don't always get to a benefit. Yeah. But if you've got 20 features and you do that exercise, you'd usually find you've got 3 or 4 benefits that really have power, and keep going through that. And just those 3 words really bring things to life for people. So I love talking about presentations about that, and I rant about it as often as I can. And then take the old Simon Sinek approach and spin it round: 10 benefits, advantages, features. Start with why and all that sort of thing. But do you find, though, that when your customers come calling, they just want to talk features first?
Yeah, primarily. Yeah, again, maybe it's our market. They already know their pain points, and certainly for us, they already know the pain point, and they know the benefit they're trying to solve. Right? It's I'm doing data entry, and that's costing me time, so I want to get my time back. I'm making errors, so I want to get more accurate data. So they kind of already come with that preconception, and maybe that's a good thing for us, because then we can kind of get directly into. So we've quite an educated purchasing persona, right? When they come to us, they're shopping for accounts payable software typically. Mm-hmm. That might be indicative of the fact that we're a smaller business, so we're not spending millions. We're bootstrapped, right? So we haven't taken any funding on, so we don't have the luxury of spending millions on testing and learning. So our top of funnel is quite narrow. So our top of funnel, persona is they're already kind of shopping for payables, which absolutely leads us down to that features. I love that tip you just gave. It's like, for me, it's same concept, but I often ask, so what? That's great, but so what?
Yeah. I should give a shout out to SMX Munich. I'm speaking there 16th of March, and the presentation is called "Which Means That." It's about exactly that. I'm not sure how well it's going to translate into German. And look, Germans speak English better than the English, right? But that's fine. But I'm just hoping that "which means that" works in German. The German organizers say it will. But if you're on SMX Munich, I'll put the link in the show notes. Please do come along, and I'll talk about that in a bit more depth then. So yeah, that's a sales tip for you as well, Chris. Come along to SMX Munich.
I'll be there. I'll dial in.
Oh, geez. I've made them promise to invite me back next year when it's actually in person, because in 2021, it's obviously going to be remote. I'm like, nightmare.
Yes, I don't. a great
But,
trip, a great country.
yeah, brilliant, isn't it? Brilliant. And look, I've kind of opened the door to COVID, and the COVID klaxon's going to go off in a minute. Oh, hold on. There it is. But you can't do a podcast at the minute without talking about the great accelerant, the great COVID crisis of 2020. Lots of businesses struggled. Lots of businesses saw sales go through the roof. You don't need to divulge numbers, but one, how did it affect you? And two, what changes did you have to make to keep things rolling?
Yeah, it's been just such a tough year all around for everybody personally and in business. We count ourselves fortunate, Andy. We got relatively unimpacted, and we had an accelerator in COVID. So if we look at coming into March, whenever COVID really started to take grips, we were focused quite heavily on retail and hospitality in Australia and in the UK. About 50% of our revenue came from those channels, and overnight, both governments just had a shutdown of those industries. So we took a jolly good kicking, to be honest, in April. Like overnight, bang, the wee worm that was going up to the right suddenly took a sharp detour south. Yep. So it was tough. Top line revenues were hit pretty bad. We lost 50%, overnight, which is never easy to consume. We were lucky in that as a business, because we're self-funded, we didn't have massive costs, so we were able to consume that for a period. So it was squeaky bum time, to be honest. It was like, well, how long is this going to last? In hindsight, we were fine because it was only a 3 month, and then we sort of ticked back up. But yeah, so really tough from that perspective. But on the flip side, as we talked about earlier, the COVID and forcing people to work from home really forced businesses to work out, crap, I was using paper last week. I now don't have physical people to sign this paper. What am I doing? And then it started to be telephone calls, emails, all of that manual communication methods, which was just not working. So we saw a 250% increase in Q2 in our inbound inquiries, which was absolutely amazing for us. So I'm glad to say, that's worked out really well. We made a couple of pivots to try and take advantage of the situation. We focused heavily from a product roadmap. We focused on remote working specific tools. So we have a 12-month roadmap rolling at any time, and we brought forward all of those features that were going to help our businesses survive and collaborate remotely. And then we split the team into two. So we're still a small family business. We're owned by my brothers, my co-founder. So, we pride ourselves on customer service. For me, absolutely everything starts with a good product and great service. Marketing, sales, that all just comes on top of that platform. So, we wanted to do what was right. So we set up an internal Scrum team that their job was just to liaise and work with our customer base that were being really badly impacted. Payment holidays, whatever support. We posted a few blogs just about trying to give them general advice, stuff like that. And we're lucky we have a lot of accountants and bookkeepers that use our product or recommend our product. So again, we tried to get them to help our businesses where we could and tried to be a connector. So that was one half of the business. And then the other half was on the acquisition front, accelerating that. We did a few basic things like expanded our hours. So we saw that a lot of our customers or potential customers were now shopping in the morning or night for solutions because they had to look after their kids 9 to 5, right? So simple things, we split our teams up and we gave 24-hour coverage. Simple things like we downloaded every communication tool under the sun, right? Because whatever a customer, whatever way they wanted to speak to us, we wanted to just make that easy. So some basic tactics like that probably aren't revolutionary, but they really made a difference for us. And
you say they're not revolutionary. The number of companies that didn't do them is amazing. What problems, though, did 250% growth in inquiries cause you? Because it sounded like, oh, brilliant, 250% growth in a quarter. But actually, your team's built around handling your normal volumes. What issues did it cause?
Yeah, so good issues, right? It's the good issues to have. So we really, prior to that spike, we were lucky. We were growing, right? So we were scaling up. We were getting ready for scale. So we already had a little bit of capacity, certainly not adequately prepared for that sort of growth. But it meant customers maybe they didn't get that quick response rate, things like that. We had to sort of start to, ordinarily we'd be very reactive and very available for conversations, for onboarding and training and things like that. So we just had to drag some of those out. But we sort of moved to anywhere we could automate things, right? So training, for example, we started to do a bit more group-based, webinar-based training. How can we start to service more people without using any more internal resource? So yeah, and things like that, we tried to outsource it. But I'll be honest, testament to my team, it was just a lot of hours and a lot of work, the guys to sort of, at the end of the day, although for me it might be sales, right? These were businesses that were struggling to survive, struggling to do things. So it was very empowering for us that we were able to actually get in and make a difference. So my guys were very happy to put the extra in, and it was quite a rewarding period, to be honest.
Brilliant. So what do you do from a marketing perspective then as you start to plan for 2021? So we're recording this in December. It's going to go out in 2021, obviously. But when you start planning, you've got a look at, well, our plan for this year went out the window because of COVID. Our customer numbers are now at a different scale to where we expected them to be because of where we are. What do you look at from a marketing perspective? Are you looking at continuing that growth? Have you reset your trajectories of what you're aiming for? Does that mean pushing more into certain channels? What's the thinking? What are the discussions that you've been having?
Yeah, great question, Andy, and probably a very long answer, but I'll keep it as short as I can. So, I mean, we're in a transition period, right? The last 2 years for us as a new business has been, as I mentioned, really focused on product and support the wraparound services, right? I'm a big believer in getting those right before you start to go and try and load up your funnel, right? So looking at that middle and bottom, part of the funnel, and we've done a really good job on that. And what we've been doing in the last 6 to 12 months through COVID, which is a bit skewed, is really testing on a budget, right? And one of the things I'm a big believer in is just rapid testing, right? Rapid prototyping. So just try different things. So we've picked probably every channel under the sun. And on a limited budget, we've done little tests, right? By vertical, by industry, by channel, different mediums, different keywords, different Google AdWords. Really just trying to see what pops and sort of get a gauge from the market. So we're listening to shoppers from that perspective, but also listening to our customers. Okay, big advocate internally of not making assumptions. So we spend a lot of time listening to customers and watching customers. Something Intuit are very big on is this concept of a follow me home, which means you basically watch them, right? And watch their behavior. You don't ask, because then you don't get leading answers. So again, spend a lot of time just really trying to get to know our customers. And to answer your question specifically, from a planning perspective next year, yeah, for us, it's very much about, we've realigned our forecasts. They've went up quite aggressively. So over the last 2 months, we've increased our spend week on week, and we're trying to test the elasticity of the increased spend, right? So if we double, if we quadruple, do we get a double, quadruple ROI? Is a linear equation. So done a lot of data analysis on that. Another thing for us, from a marketing standpoint, that I am massive on is that data element. We dig really deep in. It's not just like, let's look at the Google Ads numbers and look at the graphs. Let's actually understand, is there any vanity metrics in there, and our social things, because we find that if we just look at, things like likes and shares and things like that, it doesn't really give us a story. So, we sit down and we spend a lot of time. But for me, although that takes us away from other areas of the business, I mean, that's critical. That's the foundation. You need to understand where your spend's going. So for us, with limited budget, when we do start to, pour more juice on that fire, hopefully it's going to set us off in the right direction. And we're still learning, right? Like I say all that, there's so much we're not doing. And I think that's something as a business leader I've had to become comfortable with, is what we're not doing. So again, trying to stay a bit narrow, Andy. So, okay, this is this quarter's target. We're going to do this. We're not doing that. It's as important to stay really narrow. So next year, we're excited to build the team out, start looking at other channels and other geographies as well. I mentioned North America. I'm sure we're going to have lots of learnings. Everyone tells me each state is like an individual country. So, but that's so much fun, right? We're learning every day, and it's just a really exciting journey to be on.
So I want to ask you about two things. I want to go back and talk about the follow me home that they did at Intuit. And then I want to talk a little bit about some of the mistakes that you've made as well. But so I think what you're talking about is ethnography, to give it its fancy marketing title. And only yesterday I was on a podcast, which is coming out sometime around now, Marketed Not Live. It's the podcast that goes with Marketed Live conference. And we're talking about ethnography, how a lot of marketers, especially digital marketers, spend so much of the time looking at data and information up until the point of sale, and then never care about what happens to that person afterwards. Or, it falls into somebody else's team to look at repeat purchases and things like that. And why would you not want to find out what they do with your product or service after you've bought it? It just seems like absolute madness to me. So what we're doing to approach it, and what lessons did you take from that?
Yes, again, so for me as a business leader, I obviously have the overall vested interest of the entire funnel, and that includes attrition, right? And if I think back into it, we had a cross-functional team, and there was a certain level of collaboration, but there was also certain silos. You guys go and get customers, right? You guys retain customers. You're the product marketing team. But for me, it's so costly to acquire customers today, right, in the digital space. I agree. I don't understand why then you don't want to retain those customers, or why you don't want to learn from those customers to help refine your messaging, when you're going after that top of funnel. And I think most of the great marketers I've worked with, they've got that holistic approach, and they corral their teams to cross-collaborate and share information. But, you're right, there's a lot that don't do it, and I don't quite understand why. And I think for us, our customers are brilliant. They love to talk. They've got jobs to do. You just engage them. They love to talk. So on that follow me home concept, it's about watching. Okay, so it might be, it used to be in person potentially, not so much at the moment.
Yep.
I was dialing in, right, and just saying, hey, tell you what, just go about your daily business for the next hour, and you just watch them. Where do they go? If you're with them in person, how are they reacting? Where are they getting frustrated? Where are you seeing delight? And really picking out the areas that make them feel warm and fuzzy, right? And if that's where someone's feeling warm and fuzzy, just directly transcribe that into, what you're talking about when you're talking about your product. So that's sort of watching our customers. And, we also talk to the front line, all the support. The support team is a wealth of knowledge, right? They're talking to customers all day. They're hearing what they don't like, what they do like. So, really encourage any marketing organization should be absolutely step two with their customer support guys.
Were you listening to the interview I did with Paul for this podcast? Because that is the other thing we talked about, is how many marketers don't talk to support, or depending on the size of the business, smaller businesses, sometimes it's the receptionist is the font of knowledge about everything. And you talk to the receptionist, and people don't like this, they don't like that. Well, how do you know? Well, I deal with all the returns. And then you go upstairs, you talk to the MD, and the MD's like, our product does this, it does this, it does this. You're like, that's not what the receptionist's telling me. And people just don't talk across organizations that, your pay grade's not big enough to be in this important meeting room. You're like, bring those voices in. That's the voice of the customer. Get that in the room.
That's right. You're dead right, Andy. And I didn't watch the podcast, by the way, in case you think I'm ripping off Paul. These are all my own ideas. You're dead right, though. And I think it's interesting. So for me as a startup, challenging organization, I love that, because that's where big incumbents get complacent. Mm-hmm. They have all of these layers, and you're dead right. They just don't engage, and you end up with these silos and these problems. And for us, that's fantastic. We have a totally flat structure. And we're in one office, we're in one open plan office. Everybody's talking all day. But 100% agree. When I think back of my corporate days, those were the main challenges. And then, big buzzwords, OKRs, KPIs, and all that sort of stuff, again, fundamentally can break down innovation and collaboration. So we think really carefully about how we incentivize our team. And everybody has that holistic incentivization. It's not just about you go and do this. And we find that really helps encourage the collaboration element.
Brilliant. No. And the old, what's the phrase? Show me how you measure me, and I'll show you how I'll perform. Something like that. So people, you set them an objective, they'll go and do that. And if that's not aligned with everything else, then you fall to pieces. So I really like that. Like the sound of that. Let's talk about some cock-ups. People love hearing about the mistakes, and they don't have to be recent. They can be, they can be old school as well, from Sydney, from America, from Belfast. Give us an example of something that you thought was going to be a great marketing success and just fell flat on its face. And what did you learn from that? Because that's the important bit. The stories can be fun, but what did you learn from that?
Yeah, dead right. And that is the most important thing, right? I mean, there's no such thing as a failure as long as you take something from it and you do something better the next time. Um, well, I've made a whole host of mistakes just within Lightyear, even, but probably on a small scale, not overly interesting. But I think probably one of the biggest, I wouldn't say mistakes, but I was part of a team that into it in Australia. And we did this really bold and aggressive campaign, right? It was called Infinity at the time, I can't recall. But basically, we were a challenger brand, and we went out and basically spent a lot of money to get a few customer verbatims and say we are the best in the market, right? Now, in all transparency, at that time, we were nowhere near the best in the market. The product just wasn't there, right? Now, I don't want to be critical. There was a lot of good things about that campaign. We worked really well as a team. It got a lot of energy into the team. It gave us a sense of purpose. But I think, if we were honest with ourselves, the actual result probably didn't do us any favors. It probably exposed a few product gaps and weaknesses. So in hindsight, that probably wasn't a great outcome. But to your point, what did we take from it? What did we learn? How did we pivot? We looked at data, analyzed the data, and some of the really great things where we learned how to work well together. So although it wasn't a success strategically, the execution, the collaboration, everything about it went really well. And we learned from it, right? We looked at the results. We saw that probably, we weren't getting what we wanted in terms of at day one. If we set out what's your key metric, we probably didn't hit that. But as we evolved, we changed our metrics, our OKRs, our objectives, and it became just more than what we set out to do. I think that's really important, right? Don't set out with a target and then no matter what, you're trying to always hit that target. It's okay to change things, right? And this maybe comes back to the KPI conversation. A lot of businesses say that's your KPI. If you don't hit that, you don't succeed, and that can't be right. So you've got to understand as you evolve that there can be great outcomes, and sometimes you can have better outcomes from a project holistically, but not actually deliver on what you set out to deliver, and that's absolutely fine.
I was reading a Harvard Business Review thing about setting KPIs and the old SMART objectives, but this guy was arguing for fast objectives, not smart. Now, I can't remember what the A, the S, and the T, but the important thing I took from it was the F was for frequent. And he made the point you were making there, that actually you set an objective for a year, and maybe if you do really well, you review it after 3 months. If you're not, you maybe review it after 6. Sometimes you don't even review it until the end of the year, and it's a pass or fail, right? Actually, he said the best way to set objectives is frequent. Weekly conversations about the objectives. And that does mean the objective moves sometimes. And he went on to explore how difficult that can be in big organizations, obviously, where your objectives are trying to hit this, which helps to that, which helps to do different bits as it hits the overall corporate objective. But the main point to take from it was frequent. Smart's great, but frequent's better, which I thought was really important there, because you touched on that actually move things as they go, just change your direction of travel if it's not right. Yeah. Is that something that you then bring into how you work now?
Yeah, absolutely. Trying to do that. And, we haven't had a quarterly target that has started off on day one and ended as the same targets on, the last day of the quarter. So we always move and pivot. And there's so many things in a startup, particularly, that change. You have to have that flexibility. So yeah, we're big on that. I think what's important for a marketing organization or just any organization in a business, is find what works for you, right? There's all these frameworks which are super beneficial, SMART, FAB, OKRs, KPIs, whatever. But I think don't get hung up on following the specific guidance and trying to fit your organization into a framework. Take the concepts, take all the benefits that they provide, and just make it work for you. And for us, that means super agile, super fluid, and continually changing. And I think what's important for me as a leader to my team is that, it's fine to change, and then they don't get beaten up about not hitting that metric. It's fine to change the metric, and they can pivot and change.
Brilliant. From a purist marketing perspective, I'm also getting a message that my connection's unstable, so let's hope you can still hear me. From a pure marketing perspective, I talk about marketing in the 4 Ps: product, price, place, promotion. I'll argue with anyone who wants to talk about 5 or 7 or whatever, but let's stick to 4 for the minute. When I have SaaS people on the show, I always ask them about this, because as you grow to a certain size in SaaS, product gets separated from marketing really, really quickly. So it sounds like in your organization, you're all in one room or two rooms because you've got the one in Sydney. And there's a lot of sharing and a lot of information. But as you're scaling and growing up and you start to get into departments and silos, is marketing going to be unhooked from product? And if so, how do you make sure that that continues to be, that feedback continues to come between the departments?
Yeah, so it's a definite risk, Andy, right? And it's a fear. It's something keeps me awake at night is, as we scale, how do we keep the connection? So yeah, it's definitely a risk. I think a few tactics that we will try and deploy, and whether they're successful, we'll find out, is, making sure that somebody is identified as that connector, right? So somebody needs to be a cross-functional person, and your job is to make sure that that marketing team and that product team and that support team are totally connected. And that's not me as a CEO. That needs to be somebody whose specific job is to make people connected. So we're going to identify that champion that's in that sort of operational connector role. And then I think, to be honest, a lot of the sort of things you can do is just behavior, your culture, right? We've got customer stuff all over the walls. Anytime we get great feedback and things, it's plastered all over the internal, Slack communication channels and things. Just really putting customer front and center so that the whole business thinks customer. And then that builds a hunger. So our marketing team, they see this and they're hungry to go and learn more. I got some, wow, brilliant, I could use that, or I could learn a bit more. So, trying to just drive that natural hunger and curiosity to keep people collaborating. So it's a good question, and it's definitely going to be a challenge for us, but hopefully we can find a way that works well. It still keeps the connection.
Keep that going. Brilliant. I want to talk about Belfast for a little bit. You're a local lad, as you said. You had the joys of living in Sydney. You've done a stint in America, now you're back home. Belfast, for those who don't know, has kind of reinvented itself over the last few years as a bit of a tech hub. There's a huge ecosystem. There's a load of companies doing security, payments, and all sorts of stuff like that. Probably within a couple of 100 yards of where you're sitting, there's businesses that have a global impact in that sort of space. What are the benefits and drawbacks of that cluster and of being in Belfast as well?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's such an interesting past, Belfast, right? I'm sure most of your listeners are aware, 30 years ago, the tech innovation was probably in sort of bomb making and that sort of thing. So we've definitely
I can't say that because I'm not from here, but you can.
I can say it. I'm from here. No one's offended. But yeah, but prior to the Troubles, which I think a lot of sort of the latest generation probably think of the Troubles, but there's been a history of innovation in Belfast. Titanic was built here, biggest shipbuilding company in the world. The rope works, linen, aerospace, just really massive sort of history of innovation. And I think that's sort of been built within Northern Irish people. But yeah, I was in Sydney and then I was in Silicon Valley for a year. So I've got to sort of experience how, cities can really turn into innovative hubs. And I'm really glad to say that what I'm seeing here in Belfast, it's very much moving in the right direction in that regard, and there's a lot of things going for it. Geographically, it's fantastic. You can manage Europe and North America pretty well. South Africa is directly below us from a time zone perspective. So it's really well placed geographically. Fantastic universities. Belfast has two really great unis, which for a city of our size is, it's quite unique. And they provide a lot of really great talent. It's quite affordable to live, but also to employ. So, one of the big factors, when I set the business up was, well, how much is it going to cost me to obviously run the business from this location? And Belfast is, easily as affordable as you'll find in the sort of developed Western world. And the ecosystems are thriving. There's a really supportive government agency, the Invest Northern Ireland, lots of hubs like Catalyst. I'm down here and, shared offices, lots of collaboration. It's brilliant. I was totally surprised when I came back. I really wasn't expecting it to be as advanced as it is. And just recently in the fintech 50 was announced for the UK. We were announced as one of the fintech 50. And Northern Ireland had two others. So 3 out of 50 UK-wide companies identified as the 50 most fastest growing scale-ups, and that's amazing. So we had the highest representation per head.
Yeah. That's 6% of the list for about 1% of the population. So that's less than 1%. Anyway, so yeah, really, really good. And you became the poster boy for Invest Northern Ireland with their press release after that, which I saw. Maybe we'll put a link to that in the show notes as well. What about the drawbacks of, and I don't want to be negative, I'm really positive about Belfast in the place, but are there any drawbacks? And I'll give you a conversation I had with, I'll not mention the name or the company, but they struggle sometimes in Belfast to recruit developers particularly, but certain other skills as well, because there has been such an explosion of companies going, oh, Belfast, we want to be based there, that they, hoovering up talent to work for big companies, or it just becomes quite difficult to get and retain people. That is one thing you hear sometimes. Have you got does that sound like something you've had a problem with? Have you got any other drawbacks and things you'd like like the city to focus on for the next 5 years?
Yeah, it definitely, right. It's careful what you wish for. On the one hand, you've got these great big international companies, FDIs coming in, and they're driving a lot of the investment and innovation, right, which then creates the hub. But on the flip side, then it's a really competitive market. And as a startup, particularly, you've got to work hard, right? You've got to be really on it. You can't, and these, bigger companies tend to have a lot of benefits. Come into a 4-day week, take extended holidays. That's all great, but that doesn't really work for a startup that needs to start making money super quick, right? So yeah, the talent is hard in certain areas, particularly tech. I'd echo that. Also, doesn't affect us because we're not seeking investment at the moment, but it's hard to get to a Series A or B. A lot of companies can access seed funds and things here, but there is no there's no local primary big investors that do Series A and B. So something I hear a lot from the co-founders networks it is hard to kick on to that next global level. So those are probably the two main drawbacks, Andy, to be honest. But I definitely would say the positives much outweigh the negatives here.
Brilliant. And look, it's such a great change to see in a city, because I've been here 10 years now, and I've been coming for maybe 20. So you can see how it's developed and evolved and has a real energy about the city as well. So, long may it continue. It's not perfect, far from it, but, it feels like there's a lot of people trying to drag it in the right direction. So, and it's good to have you here as well. What about the Sydney office? How does that work? Obviously, you mentioned time zones. Yes, you can do 24-hour support. That's great. But what challenges did that cause you as an organization?
Yeah, so product-wise, there's some challenges. You kind of got to have different localizations and things like that. So there's obvious overheads there. Coverage of tech support, right? So our tech team are here. Things can go wrong in the middle of the night. So at the moment, unfortunately, our CTO wakes up out of bed. He has a red phone beside his table.
He loves that.
We put the bat signal up. So yeah, there's challenges like that which we will mature out of, and we'll be able to put better cross skills into both offices. And then just, management meetings, things like that. We focus a lot on having collaboration and making sure we're together, but that means late nights, early mornings for our staff. But I don't think in this day and age in tech, I don't think that's anything unique to Lightyear, right? That's kind of what global organizations need to do. Mm-hmm. And I guess Sydney, the other drawback of Sydney is just price, right? Rent is expensive, price of wages are expensive, stuff like that.
Yeah. Full of Aussies as well, isn't it? That's the other problem.
That's right. But for us,
I'll wait for the hate mail. I'll wait for the hate mail to come in on that one.
Maybe cut that bit out. But Sydney's brilliant, right? Aussies are fantastic. They're a great bunch of people. A very laid back way of doing. You had Brad on the call,
yeah. And look, I'm a big rugby league fan as well. So Sydney and Bris Vegas are great cities for me. But listen, we're running out of time. I can see the time on the clock, and there's a couple of questions that I want to ask you because I ask everybody these. So books. What books do you read for marketing, for running your business? Where is it you get your information from?
Yeah, so a lot of guys will hate me for saying this, but I don't really have time to read books. And I understand books have a lot of benefit. I have 2 kids, nearly 3. I struggle to just find the time, to be honest, Andy. So my recommendation for anyone like me who's really time poor, I try and just have snippets, 20-minute, 10-minute reads. thing. And I've signed LinkedIn, to be honest, is fantastic. The LinkedIn algorithms seem to know me really well. They serve me up great content. So LinkedIn algorithms, things like Medium, I get the newsletters, different bits of content each day. So I'm more of a snippet reader, Andy, to be honest, but I find that I probably get much of what I need from those.
Is there anybody's in particular, any newsletter you see and you go, oh yeah, that's this one that comes through?
Yeah, so I'm sort of fintech oriented. So the Fin Extra newsletter is good for me. It's fantastic. And then just Medium, I sign up for the Medium newsletter and it serves me up great. Sort of all our entrepreneurs and things like that. Super, super good content.
Great stuff. And to finish off, what is the one question you were expecting me to ask you today that I haven't asked you?
I thought you'd ask me what I want for Christmas, Andy. And what I would want for Christmas is a better golf handicap for a start. But on a more serious note, I think everybody, myself included, we need to start thinking, a bit more about the world. For me, I think COVID has really highlighted to me the level of inequality. I think the world is heading on a really bad path, even climate change and stuff like that. So maybe I'm getting older, but as I mature, I start to think about these things more, about the world and about equality. So for me, I would love everybody in both private and corporate to start hopefully making more of a concerted effort, and government making more of a concerted effort on things like climate change. So that would be my wish for Christmas, Andy. If you can make it happen.
Have that for Christmas. Well, look, it's interesting you mentioned, I was reading just the other day about COVID, and when it first hit, it was we're all in this together. But as you start to look at the stats now, it really is disproportionately hitting working class, people of benefits, people of certain ages, certain races. When we're not quite all in this together, it seems the poorer you are, the more you're going to get hit. So yeah, I think your Christmas wish is a good one, and one that we should work next year to bring to life. The Lightyear Foundation, that's what we can launch next.
I love it. Well, we did a bit of charity stuff this year for us, which was really rewarding, and really happy to do it. But definitely, it's funny you said we have had chats about the Lightyear Foundation. So, I think it's upon all of us to try and make an effort to do a bit more, right? And that's certainly something we'll try and keep getting better at as a business.
Great stuff. Chris, thank you very much for your time. If anybody wants to contact you, how do they get in touch with you?
You can find me on Twitter at LightyearChris, or you can email me or go to our website, lightyear.cloud, and you can find me there.
And we'll put all Chris's details in the show notes as well. So Chris, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Andy. It's been a pleasure.
Cheers. Thank you.
Bye-bye.